Let me go ahead and turn it on. So welcome everyone to DC Refers Reconnect. My name is Nancy Lopez. I'm a board member at DC Refers, and I am really pleased to share today with Kaitlin Forster and Dan Mills from the DC Bar's Practice Management Advisory Service. Before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about DC Refers, and hopefully we can walk through that. So DC Refers is a community of lawyers and mediators who serve modest means clients. So people who earn more than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, but less than 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. So folks who usually don't qualify for free legal assistance, but often can't afford market rates for the legal or mediation help that they need. And so lawyers who are interested in applying can join our directory at dcrefers.org. Our lawyers on our panel are members in good standing with the DC Bar. They have at least 2 years of legal experience. They have malpractice insurance and positive professional and client references. And then they charge their modest means clients between $75 and $150 an hour. They pay a $50 non-refundable fee just to apply to join DC Refers. When you go to our website, this is what you see. In the bottom corner, you see join our directory. That's how that process gets started. And then you see the green button that says find a lawyer, and that's where clients go to try and get connected with legal or mediation services. And we have a number of different practice areas that our lawyers cover, from family to business to criminal and traffic. And so we have a need in all of these areas. And so if you know people who might want to connect with clients of modest means, I would encourage you to encourage them to apply. Or if you know clients who need help and fall into that income level, send them our way. The other thing that we do is low Bono mediation. And so if you have a client who might benefit from mediation, we have a panel of mediators who will again do mediation for a reduced fee rate for people who are in that modest means category. And we're really excited. It's kind of the first in the nation to have low Bono mediation in this kind of way. We have 2 upcoming DC Refers Reconnects that I'm just going to mention. The first one is in October. It's the latest on student loans. Courtney Weiner, who is a consumer law person, will talk about all of the different changes to student loan programs, what the application requirements are, and all of the different ways that you can take advantage of those. And then in November, we were going to welcome Kelly Neptune, who's the new executive director of the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. You can see on the screen the link to register for those. And once you sign up, it's free, but you have to sign up to get the Zoom link. And so with that, I will introduce our speakers. Dan has been at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, I believe, since 2008. He came to DC from Indiana. He had his own firm for a number of years. And a fun fact about him is that in addition to being incredibly helpful in his role as a practice manager, advisory manager, he is a documentary filmmaker. And Kaitlin comes to us from Michigan. She was a solo practitioner here in DC from 2012 until 2021. And she used to work on the Legal Counsel for the Elderly panel to do wills for elderly people in DC. She joined the DC Bar's Practice Management Advisory Service earlier this year. And a fun fact about her is that for a while, she started a food business that involved making gourmet chips, which I'm kind of curious about. And with that, I will hand it over to Dan and Kaitlin so they can tell us more about PMAS and the Practice 360 and all the different services that are available. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. So what Kaitlin and I do at the DC Bar as practice management advisors is we help lawyers with business issues. And we spend a lot of time, in group settings and classroom settings and one-on-one, as well as on email and the phone, addressing issues that have to do with starting, growing, and managing a law firm. And we have unique relationship with the bar members in that we're safe to talk to because we're prohibited from reporting a rule violation. And that's a really important thing. Under Rule 1.6J, the people that do our job at the bar can't make a report to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel if, you know, we come into knowledge of a rule violation. And I always tell the people we work with, you know, Kaitlin and I wouldn't be inclined to do that anyway. I mean, we're not rats, you know. We're not gonna rat you out. But even if we were inclined to do that, we're prohibited, so we're safe to talk to. And that's a great policy, you know. I mean, otherwise, you know, people probably wouldn't feel comfortable talking to us. And you know, the interesting thing is that we learn about rule violations all the time, and 9 times out of 10, the lawyer has no idea, you know, what they're doing is not rule compliant. And oftentimes they're shocked to find out, you know, and so the idea is to get it corrected. But it's not all about following the rules. I mean, we spend a lot of time on, you know, really fascinating topics like marketing and client relations and productivity technology and all that sort of thing. So that's what we do. I'll show you real quickly the where we are on the website, where our stuff is. So if you come to the bar's website, the quickest way to find us is just to put your cursor on For Lawyers and drop down to Practice Management Advisory Service and just click on that link. And this is essentially what Kaitlin and I do. We've got our courses and that sort of thing here. And we have a big program coming up on Thursday or Wednesday this coming week, Wednesday, called Praxis 360. It's an all-day program. And then these are the ones we do regularly. Basic training is every month. It's how to start and grow a law firm. Managing money is a relatively new program, all about fee agreements and handling money. The Lunch and Learn series is something where we have, you know, from 1 to 3 programs a month, usually noon on Thursday. We just had one today on building a brand for a lawyer. And then this one is one we did in a classroom setting for a long time. And now Kaitlin and I are doing it in a one-on-one setting, a kind of a law firm incubator program. And we have about 6 lawyers actively in it and a couple of more just joining. And they essentially sign on for a series of one-on-one sessions with us where we help them with specific issues that they're dealing with in getting their firm up and going. And then there are other aspects, you know, to the website as well, information about IOLTA accounts and how to find our newsletter and other sorts of things. But that's where the information is on the website, and people contact us by phone, by email, and you know, when they want to work with us one-on-one, then we're doing that on Zoom primarily now, although we're starting to get back into meeting with folks at bar headquarters in the conference rooms there. And so I've been doing this now. I'm into my 15th year. Kaitlin is just completing year 1.
Year 1 in November.
Yeah, and she, you know, comes from the small firm world way more recently than I do. You know, it's like a distant memory for me. So I'll let her talk about what it's like for her now to have started and grown a law firm, you know, a food business, and now be working as essentially a consultant for lawyers?
Yeah, I took basic training before starting my firm back in, gosh, I guess I think I took it in 2012 maybe. And this was all in person. I think I actually remember that my partner that I started the law firm with had signed up, and I think it had it was full or something. And I think I just showed up. You asked if I was a crasher, and I definitely was. But yeah, so I mean, I started my firm, and I focus on estate planning and mostly, but also did a little bit of like real estate litigation. I did family law for a bit. And yeah, I started a food business in 2013, and that was coming out of a year spent doing high conflict child custody litigation. And I just needed a break from that. And so I sort of shifted my focus to starting, I still had the firm going, but starting a food business as well. So yeah, the chips they were made out of chickpeas. And I will say that I don't think I really understood marketing until I had to market a non-legal product, and really figuring out like branding. I did not understand until I was like working on branding with a logo for the food product and packaging and your placement on the shelf and how much all of that matters. And as much as it seems like it would be unrelated to practicing law, I think the lessons from marketing carry over. And I really took marketing and branding so much more seriously after doing that. So I think that experience was very helpful in kind of infusing me with more of a creative attitude towards marketing. It didn't feel as salesy anymore. It didn't feel, I think it was a little bit less like imposter syndrome too. It was just sort of like understanding the marketing concepts a little bit better. And so, yeah, I think going through the pandemic with a small firm was definitely an interesting experience. That I was already working somewhat remotely a good amount, and that was part of my practice because I worked with families who had young kids, and they usually wanted to do a virtual process essentially. So that kind of transitioned well when the pandemic started. But yeah, it's been really nice to join the bar. And actually, I think one of my favorite parts is the successful small firm course that we do, where we get to meet with other lawyers who are doing the same thing that I did a bunch of years ago, and really watch them kind of make connections and apply those sorts of lessons to their own firm, and kind of watch them grow and come up with, develop their business plan and their marketing plan. And I think it's really interesting to see the one-on-one progression of lawyers who are kind of coming into their own and growing their business.
Yeah, anybody have questions at all about what we do?
I
Nope.
am curious about if there have been different kind of ethical and business challenges with the pandemic and how people are operating and dealing with clients. DC Refers felt like we were really lucky because we were almost all virtual anyhow. Like the initial contact with clients was all online. And
Yeah.
so it was easy to shift. But what challenges have people found with the pandemic in the small firm practice?
Yeah, well, there were quite a few lawyers who made the transition pretty easily because they had the technology in place that allowed them to pretty much not miss a beat. I mean, if you know any of the lawyers in the Potomac Law Group law firm, they've been remote from day one, and they're like an 11, 12-year-old firm. They don't really have physical space that they operate from, and there are probably 160, 170 lawyers in that firm now. And, there were much smaller firms that made the transition pretty well, but then there were quite a few that really struggled, to be able to communicate, to be able to get paid. And I remember talking to lawyers early on that we're trying to figure out how to have clients, pay them by check and how to pick up the check and all this sort of thing. And so they really had to scramble around and bite the bullet and adopt technology that would allow them to operate electronically much more efficiently. And many of them did. It had the effect of forcing a lot of law firms to adopt technology that they kind of knew in the back of their mind they ought to be looking at, but lawyers are so slow to do that. Many of them are, and it kind of shoved them into it. So all of a sudden, lawyers were using Zoom that didn't know what it was before the pandemic. Fortunately, in our office, we already had a Zoom account and we used it quite a bit before the pandemic. So it was easy for us to shift to doing everything through Zoom. But many lawyers struggled with it. Yeah, it just really kind of depends upon how technologically savvy you were in terms of how you could transition to it. But the amazing thing is that so many lawyers have realized, well, we don't really need a physical office, do we? So they've gotten rid of their lease or, sold their building or whatever, and they're operating more or less virtually, have a lot less overhead. It's had a lot of, in a way, it's had a lot of positive impacts, I think. It's caused people to really have to think on their feet quite quickly.
I agree.
But one point I want to make is sometimes we get confused with the ethics guides at the bar. We're not ethics counsel. We get a lot of ethics questions because of what we do. People just sort of naturally assume that. And most of the time, unless, it's something that we deal with all the time, we refer it over to the ethics team. If it has to do with trust accounts and fee agreements, which is something we deal with all the time, and frankly, is not too complicated an area. If you sort of live in it all the time, it's easy to absorb it. We'll deal with those issues. But when it has to do with other sorts of things like conflicts, or anything else that's kind of out of our wheelhouse, we send it over to Hope Todd's team. We've got 4 really great ethics guides, and I like to say they swim in the deep end of the ethics pool. Kaitlin and I are in the shallow end.
Do other people have questions about what Dan and Kaitlin do, or what services they offer, or anything else?
I would just add that we also are involved in presenting the CLE programs on trust accounts and on fee agreements. We've developed a lot of content around those programs for the CLEs that we just go ahead and share with the folks that we deal with, through practice management. So we have, we have sample fee agreements and other information that has to do with, how to handle money properly and all that we spend a lot of time working with folks, because many of the people we work with are very knowledgeable lawyers. They're just not knowledgeable about starting and running a law firm. It's not unusual for us to help somebody that is coming out of Sidley, who's been a partner for 30 years, and now they're going to go into their own firm, and they're brilliant lawyers. They're taking business with them and all that sort of thing, but they've never had to open a bank account, or handle a bank account, or anything they need, they just speak in the firm and somebody gets it for them. Now all of a sudden they're going to have to do it all. So that's always interesting when we get to work with someone like that.
Andrea, what question do you have?
Yeah, my question is, with my hat on, not as a solo practitioner who very much values your services as a lawyer, but as a member of the board of directors of DC Refers. And I very much want to thank you, Dan, for all you have done to distribute material about DC Refers and allow us to make presentations to your lawyers and generally have access to the people that come to you for training and educational services to tell them about DC Refers. And at this point, we've been doing this for a couple of years, so you know quite a bit about us at this point, and we've made many, many presentations. So my question to you is, what do you think we can do better at DC Refers to attract more lawyers to our directory?
That might be a marketing question too, Kaitlin. When you were talking about marketing, I was thinking about our social media and if we're branded right and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think that, you have a pretty good website. I haven't looked at it for a while. I don't know if you have video on the website, but if you can figure out a way, maybe have a YouTube channel, maybe have video on your website, figure out a way to have the lawyers and maybe some clients, if they'd be willing to do it, that gets a little dicey there, but at least have the lawyers just tell short little stories about how satisfying it was to represent somebody, in such a way that nobody can figure out who the client was and all that, or what happened. I think that could be effective. The bar's pro bono program did that once, and it was a little long, actually, and there are two lawyers that helped somebody on a really interesting case, and they just had them, I think they sort of interviewed them and they recorded it and put that up years ago. These sorts of things to get traction. Nobody's going to watch anything for very long, so the shorter the better. I wouldn't go much more than a minute or two with them, so they just need to be well done. But that can that can be something that could be useful to really spread the word. And then you can even put those on social media. I think that would be one thing you could do. Just have some of your lawyers who would be willing to do that, tell an interesting story.
That's a great idea.
Beyond that, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. So do you have more demand for services from clients who need lawyers than you do have lawyers that are able to do this? Is that the dilemma?
We're trying to build our directory broader, so having a deeper pool in specific practice areas and a wider breadth of practice areas. So we would like more lawyers to join.
Yeah. One of the things I try to emphasize in day one of basic training is the unmet need that's out there for legal services. So many people have need of lawyers. It's one of the reasons why, the LegalZoom like websites have been so successful, because that's where people go because they can't afford a real lawyer. I don't know if you've done this, but one possibility would be getting in front of, there are lots of voluntary bars out there, like the women's bar, and you're probably doing that, but maybe doing that on a regular basis. the criminal defense lawyers have their own voluntary bar, the plaintiff's lawyers, defense lawyers do, getting in front of them in some way or another, could be a productive way to do it. And then, the judges are constantly dealing with pro se litigants in family court. So if there's some way you could get information that the court system could distribute, because a few years ago, they made that administrative rule where, a lawyer can now enter a limited appearance in DC Superior Court, and just, show up for a hearing or something like that. So if the Superior Court system, I don't know enough about it, to know how you do this, but if they would be willing to distribute information to pro se litigants, and not just pro se litigants, but even, lawyers that are participating, that might be a kind of a way to do it. But
I think
it's
they're all great
a-
ideas.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing. I mean, there are so many organizations in the district that are either pro bono or low bono, but it's hard to, it's hard to get the message out. The DC Bar Foundation has got some kind of a thing going on now where they're trying to come up with a more unified system of some sort. And a few years ago, there was another nonprofit that started a very similar thing. I mean, there were actually 6 or 7 nonprofits working together to sort of do a combined intake, and then help people out more to get them to the right place. I don't know what happened with that. I know about it because I actually was working on some kind of animation to show the process. And we created it, and then they didn't like it. So I don't know what happened from there. Didn't do what they wanted to do. But if there was some way you could get involved in that, unless they're just limiting it strictly to pro bono,
No, they're putting together a directory and we are on that. And then they're
Okay.
putting together a coordinated intake and referral system that they're aiming to have out in about 2 years. And we're participating in that process so that as clients come into the intake system, if they're low bono instead of pro bono eligible, they can get, funneled to the right places.
Good.
Yeah, I
Right.
think my only other thought is just based on members that we talk to who are getting practices started and don't have a lot of clients. I think the challenge sometimes is that there are attorneys who are willing, they'd be interested potentially in taking like a low bono case, but they don't have the competency in a specific area enough to really, like, if, for example, someone who wanted to do estate planning and they're like, well, I think I want to do estate planning. I think I'd be willing, maybe they'd be willing to do, flat fee, lower priced wills for seniors who need them, but they don't have any forms. They're not completely clear on how to do it. And like some sort of training in a really specific area, like how to create a simple will and powers of attorney, what needs to be in it, how do you execute it, how do you, what needs to be notarized, and making sure that attorneys are clear on the substantive law related to something that is a need that maybe is an unmet need. That was something that I did low bono estate planning, and it didn't take that long to do it for seniors, but they couldn't afford to pay, regular market rate for an attorney in DC to do it. So you do it on a low bono basis, but there's only so many attorneys who are willing to take the time to do that. So I think if there is willingness, sometimes they're just lacking in competency. And so maybe some sort of training that's either on like you know, how to do a limited appearance in family court, or, you know, and get someone who's willing to talk about what that looks like to represent someone just for one hearing. And maybe it's the ins and outs. Maybe attorneys that are already involved in doing this kind of work could do something very specific like that.
Mhm. I think those are great ideas. I see that we are about at our end of our time, and I want to be respectful of folks and their availability to be with us. So I want to say a huge thank you. It has been great to pick your brains, to hear more about what you do. I'm going to put in the chat the sign up for the next DC Refers Reconnects and remind people about when those are taking place and what the topics are. But really, thank you so much. The services you offer are so important, and it's really great to hear and be reminded about all that you're doing. And good luck with Practice 360 next week. I am sure it will be fantastic. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Take care.